All right, so here we have a circuit where we're given three different currents, given a total resistance of the circuit. Hopefully you recognize that, hey, if I take a loop through this from power supply to power supply, I've got one loop, I've got a second loop, and I got a possible third pathway, right? So we have a parallel circuit, right? So we're dealing with parallel here. And with any parallel circuit, you got certain rules that come into play. The biggest one in this case is that this current is splitting along three pathways, and in parallel, I total, the total current coming out of the battery is just equal to the current in each pathway added together, right? And so in this case, I can actually calculate I total right off the bat because we're given each individual pathway's current. And so I should get 4 amps of current total. Right? So I know I total is 4 amps. And now, hey, look, I have 2 out of the 3. Right? So from here, I can calculate V total, which should be I total times R total. And so I have 4 amps times 40 ohms. V equals IR, and so I get a total voltage of 160 volts. And so that's my answer here for the total voltage. It should just be 160 volts of voltage. Now, with that said, we now know because we're in parallel, well then I know each of these voltages should also be 160 volts. And so if I continue to break down this circuit, well, now I can calculate each individual resistance. Well, V equals IR, and so R is V over I, so this should be 160 ohms, as should this, right, which makes sense. They get the same current, right? And V divided by 2, this should be 80 ohms, right, which makes sense. And if I do those in parallel, hopefully those three resistances in parallel will give you 40 ohms. Well, in parallel, Req is just 1 over all of those. And so we can do 160 to the negative 1 plus 80 to the negative 1 plus 160 to the negative 1 and raise the whole thing to the negative 1. I'll do that in my calculator. Hopefully that answer gives me 40 is what I'm expecting. 160 to the negative 1 plus 80 to the negative 1 plus 160 to the negative 1, and raise the whole thing to the negative 1. Don't forget that last step. And sure enough, we get 40 ohms, which is what I expect in the end. So everything checks out. We have a 160 volt supply, and there's the full breakdown as well.